Traveling Italy by train is a bucket list dream for a lot of people. Unfortunately, while it can be a magical experience, it can also be laden with traps and intricacies that catch a lot of first-timers off guard. That's why in today's video, I am going to be showing you step by step how to travel Italy by train, simplifying things as much as possible. In case you're new here, hi, I'm Christina from happytowander.com. And this channel is all about practical travel tips from someone who's been there, done that, suffered all the train trauma so you don't have to. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, be sure to like and subscribe for more videos just like this one. Now let's start with a brief introduction to the Italian rail system, starting with rail providers in Italy. It's important to first distinguish the difference between Italian train operators and Italian train ticket sellers, because oftentimes for first-timers, this can cause a lot of confusion. So to clear things up, in Italy, there are two main rail operators, Trenitalia, which operates regional, intercity, and Frecce, like Frecciarossa, high-speed trains. These service over 2,000 stations across the country. There's also the NTV, best known for their Italo-branded high-speed trains that service a much smaller network, currently covering 54 cities. Confusingly, there are some operators under the Trenitalia corporate umbrella, but also maintain their own services and website, like Tren Nord and Ferrovia del Sud-Est, in addition to some smaller private companies that do more regional routes. For most tourists, you will mainly be dealing with Trenitalia or Italo, although it is important to note that these two companies operate completely independently of each other. They have their own ticket machines, their own staff, and their own websites. So if you are wanting to compare both companies, you will need to use a third-party website like Omio, Trainline, or Italia Rail, which, yes, is just a third-party reseller and not an actual operator in itself. Now let's discuss the different types of trains in Italy. Broadly speaking, we can divide Italian trains into three different categories: high speed, regional, and local, such as commuter or metro trains. These all vary in journey time and cost, so it is important to understand their key differences. High-speed trains in Italy are used to connect larger cities and are therefore quicker and boast more amenities. Seats are always assigned on these, and pricing is dynamic, which means usually it is way cheaper if you book them in advance. In terms of high-speed trains, your main options are the intercity and Le Frecce trains, mainly Frecciarossa with Trenitalia, as well as Italo trains. In addition, there are regional trains that service a smaller area, usually stopping at a lot more stops, which means they are much slower than the intercity or Frecciarossa ones. These do not have reserved seats, and prices for them are fixed, meaning they do not change depending on when you buy them. Now, as a very important note, regional train tickets in Italy are quite unique in that you actually have to validate them before you get on board. And this applies to both physical train tickets, which need to be validated in these machines right here, as well as tickets that you buy online or through their app, which have to be validated by checking in online before you get on the train. Now, this can catch a lot of first-timers off guard, and they do check this quite regularly, so if you don't validate your ticket, to them that doesn't count as a ticket that you can ride with, and they will fine you. This is a very common first-timer mistake, so definitely keep that in mind, and don't forget to validate your tickets. All that to say, if you want the flexibility of getting tickets the day of, and you don't mind the trade-off of longer journey times as well as reduced amenities on board, then regional trains actually aren't a bad option. That said, for most tourists, I would highly recommend looking into the high-speed trains, especially if you're able to book them in advance, just because oftentimes the price difference isn't that much, and it can save you a lot of time, and these trains tend to be a lot more comfortable. Now, lastly, on the local train front, we have commuter trains, as well as metro trains in some of the larger cities. These will typically have their own ticketing systems, so just be aware that if you have a ticket for, let's say, an intercity train, you usually won't be able to bring that onto the metro once you get to your destination. And most of the time, these local tickets don't need to be purchased in advance. All right, now that you understand the different types of trains, it's time to move on to the CARTAFRECCIA program. Now this is the loyalty program for Trenitalia. And for the most part, this card is intended for people who are living in Italy and take the train a lot. So most tourists wouldn't even bother looking into this. That said, there are certain discounts that only apply if you are a CARTAFRECCIA holder. So age-based discounts, as well as their Carnet program, which allows you to purchase bundles of different trips. I think there are 5, 10, or 15 trips at a discounted price. If you are hoping to take advantage of these discounts, the good news is you don't actually have to be a resident of Italy in order to apply for one of these cards. But the process for getting one is kind of hidden in their page, so this is how you do it. You actually go and fill out this form that you will then send to this email. Based on the website, it says this can sometimes take 45 business days to get to you, but actually through reading a bunch of online forums, it sounds like oftentimes they'll actually get that to you way sooner, like within 3 or 4 days. So definitely look into it if you're hoping to unlock some of those discounts. Now do be aware though that this program is specifically for Trenitalia and not Italo. Now it's time to tackle an infinitely more confusing topic, fare types and ticket classes. So to keep things simple, I will say for most regional trains, there is only one fare type, which is the ordinaria or ordinary ticket fare. And most regional trains only have a second class option. So in terms of choosing a ticket for regional trains, it's actually pretty simple. The story, however, is very different once you start looking into the high-speed trains, especially the Frecciarossa ones. One distinction to make clear is that with Italian train tickets, not only is the fare class, like business class or first class, whatever, not only is that going to impact the price of your ticket, there's also different fare types which dictate how flexible your ticket is, so whether you'll be able to change the booking or get a refund. This can be very confusing for first-timers, but it does help to see a chart. So when you buy high-speed train tickets with Trenitalia, you get a chart that looks like this. Horizontally, you have the different fare classes. Differences in this will impact where you sit, the type of amenities you get, etc. So think the difference between a standard class ticket versus a business or first class ticket. Vertically, you have the different fare types. The fare type you choose will only impact how much you pay for your ticket and your eligibility for changes and refunds. This will not impact your actual on-train experience. So someone who has a super economy business class ticket, for instance, could, in theory, be sitting right next to someone who's got a base business ticket. It doesn't impact where they sit, it only impacts how much that ticket cost and whether or not they're able to modify their ticket or get refunds. Now do be aware that some of these fare types do have their own stipulations. So some of them are only available for CARTAFRECCIA holders, for instance. Some of them are restricted based on the number of people. So you're not necessarily going to be able to take advantage of all of these. So be sure to click on that info button and read the fine print. There's a lot of it. And beware that base tickets are counterintuitively actually the most flexible option. So for me, when I see base, I think basic, but it actually isn't. It's the most expensive one and also the one that gives you the most options in terms of modifications and refunds. So just keep that in mind. Now, as for fare classes with longer distance trains, honestly, I do highly recommend booking business or any of the premium classes when that is a possibility, just because the experience tends to be a lot more comfortable and the difference in cost often isn't that much, especially if you're booking well in advance. So with the Frecciarossa train that I took recently, for instance, on business class, when we got on board, we had these big comfy leather loungers. We also got a welcome drink as well as a cute little snack box. So definitely worth the money. And you got snacks, so definitely nothing to complain about. Now, as a reminder, the chart I just showed you is just for Trenitalia, but the Italo system is very similarly set up. They have their own chart, which is a bit simpler with fewer options, but the concept is the same. In any case, do remember that vertically, you tend to have the different fare types, so that's how flexible your ticket is. And then horizontally, you have the fare classes, which is the type of carriage that you're going to be on, the type of seat that you get. All right, now with the basics covered, it's time to tackle step by step how to plan a train trip in Italy. So step number 1 is really to just actually decide whether or not train travel makes sense for your trip. Now, I personally do love taking the train in Italy. It has been my go-to mode of transport over the years, even in regions where people told me I shouldn't do it. That said, I have to admit, train travel isn't necessarily the best option for everybody. It really depends on the priorities and kind of what you're hoping to get out of your trip. So, in my opinion, train travel in Italy makes the most sense if you're packing light, so less than one big suitcase per person, if you're going between major cities that are relatively close together, if you're prioritizing comfort and scenery, and of course, if you just want the experience of taking the train in Italy. Now, luckily, train tickets in Italy are actually pretty affordable when compared to some other countries like the UK or Germany. That said, I don't think trains are necessarily the best choice if you are going to be traveling with a lot of luggage, so more than one large suitcase per person. If you're covering a really vast distance, so let's say you're going from the north of Italy to the far south. If you're traveling in an area not particularly well served by public transport, and if you're prioritizing more flexibility and freedom. Luckily in Italy, there are tons of different options. So if you are looking for something that's more budget friendly, for instance, you can look into taking the bus, or potentially ride shares with BlaBlaCar, or even booking a budget airline flight, which Italy luckily has a lot of. Or if your priority is freedom and getting off the beaten path, maybe renting a car would be a better option. Overall, if you are interested in the train, but you still want to compare your other options, one really great service is Omio. It's completely free for you to use their search functions, and then that way you can compare trains, planes, and also buses, and I think ferries as well, all at once. All right, once you've decided that train travel is indeed the way that you want to go, the next step is to buy your train tickets. Now, train tickets in Italy generally need to be purchased and validated before you get on board. These tickets can be purchased in person, either at self-service machines, at ticket offices, or most conveniently online, either through the official operators' websites or through a third-party reseller like Omio, Trainline, or Italia Rail. Usually, it is cheapest to book directly through the operator just because then there's no service fees that third parties are infamous for. But that said, there are a lot of compelling reasons to actually book with a third party. Now, the first one, as I previously mentioned, is third parties are able to compare different options across companies as well as across modes of transport. So if you are looking into a lot of different options, a third party actually does make a lot of sense. The other main perk for me is if you are planning a lot of different trips, for instance, not even just in Italy, but across Europe, then it is helpful to keep all your tickets in one place. So for me, those benefits do justify the service charge, but ultimately it's up to you. To get the best of all worlds, some people might even consider using a third party to search and then ultimately booking with the operator to save on the service fee. Now, whether it's through the operator or through a third party, I do always recommend buying a mobile ticket in advance. Paper tickets are fine, but honestly, mobile tickets are just way more convenient, especially because these days, if you have a mobile ticket, you can actually just validate it through your phone, which makes it way easier than looking for a machine in person. Now, to take advantage of mobile tickets though, you need data. So on that note, this week's video is brought to you by Airlo, the eSIM provider that I've been using for the past few months that I've been traveling around Europe. eSIMs, or embedded SIMs, are 100% digital solutions to data connection, thanks to the fact that they're pre-installed on your device and grant instant data access upon arrival by connecting you with local networks. Through the Airlo app, you can easily browse and buy eSIMs for over 200 different countries and regions, without steep roaming fees and cumbersome physical SIM cards to switch in and out. Having this instant data access actually was a complete lifesaver on my recent Italy trip, just because it allowed me to check timetables and look at the different options upon arriving at Venice Airport, where, of course, the Wi-Fi was not working. And it also came in very handy at all the different train stations that I was at throughout the trip as well. In fact, there were multiple instances where we probably would have missed our train if we didn't have the ability to buy and validate our tickets through our phones, just because the lineups actually ended up being so unexpectedly slow. So if you're ready to try Airlo out, you can scan this QR code to download the app and use this code right here to get a discount off your first purchase. You can also check out my complete Airlo guide for step-by-step instructions on how to set it all up. All right, thanks again to Airlo for sponsoring this week's video. Now let's move on to the step-by-step demo for buying tickets. So to start, you simply enter your departure point and destination. Now, do be mindful of the fact that even when you're on the English version of this website, they still want you to enter the destination names in Italian. So it's not going to work if you put in Rome or Florence. It has to be Roma and Firenze. Now, it's important to note that a lot of major cities have multiple train stations, so when you're entering your departure point or destination point, you do have to specify the actual station itself rather than just the city. Of course, if you're not sure, let's say you're open to leaving from whichever station in the city, you can look out for the term tutte le stazioni, which means all stations. And so this is going to show you all the different trains leaving from that city regardless of the station. From here, you can also toggle on a few different options. For instance, if you only want to see Frecce high-speed, intercity, or regional trains, whether you want a single one-way ticket or a return, as well as the desired date and number of passengers. Now, be sure to put the actual number of passengers. Don't just put one because you're lazy for now, just because with Trenitalia, there are a lot of discounts that you can unlock based on the number of people that are with you. So be sure to enter the correct number right at the start. Now, when you click over to the next page, what you're going to be shown is a list with all the different options. Bearing in mind, of course, that the default is the 24-hour clock, so you're going to see times displayed as 13:02 rather than 1:02 p.m. So on this next screen, you can just look at all the options. The default sorting is by departure time, but you can also sort it based on the arrival time, journey time, and price. And then on the left column, you can easily identify whether that train is a high-speed one, an intercity one, or a regional one just by looking at that little logo and the train number, which is over the time. And when you see a train that you like, then you can click this down arrow here to pull up all the different options, at which point you'll probably see a very similar chart to the one that I showed you earlier. Again, remember that all the vertical options are for the ticket type, which controls the price and flexibility, while the horizontal options are for the train class, which will impact what train carriage you're in and what amenities you get. Now, if you want to select your own seats, then you can toggle this bit here and it'll take you to the seat selection. Be aware that seat reservations aren't usually possible on regional trains. However, assigned seats are mandatory on any of the high-speed trains. So usually when you book, they'll just assign you a seat automatically. Sometimes depending on the class that you book though, you are able to choose a different seat for yourself at no extra cost. Sometimes they will charge you a bit extra, so it just all depends. But if you do want to look at the different options, you just toggle this bit on and it'll show you the seating chart. Now, a few things to pay attention to include the orientation of the seats. So in Italian trains, not really sure why, they really love having seats that face each other. So when you're looking at the seating chart, even if it's just a single seat by itself, odds are, depending on the direction that's indicated, you might be sat across from someone for the entire duration of the journey. So you might even be sharing a table, for instance. So definitely important to look into that if you're introverted like me and don't want to make eye contact with a stranger for 6 hours straight. Now, once you're happy with your seat, you can click continue and finish the transaction by adding your details and payment info. Now, this was of course the process to follow for standard point-to-point tickets, but of course it's not going to be just that simple. There are other options as well to consider, including different train passes. So let's move on to a discussion of standard tickets versus passes. Honestly, in most cases, buying individual tickets in advance is going to be the cheapest option if you're only doing a few journeys. If, however, you plan to take the train a lot though, then there are certain passes that you can look into that could save you money, while offering other perks like spontaneity. Some Trenitalia passes include the Italia in Tour promotion, which allows you to take unlimited regional trains for 3 days or 5 days, and the Trenitalia Pass, which can save you money by purchasing a number of long-distance trips in a set time period, all for one package price. Italo also has travel packs that offer similar perks. Of course, if you plan to mix regional trains and high-speed trains from across companies, and especially if you're planning on traveling to other countries in Europe, not just Italy, then it might be worth looking into a Eurail or Interrail pass, which covers you for set travel days in a certain time period across most countries in Europe. If you're interested in this, I do have a full Eurail review that you can check out. But I will say that in Italy, Eurail is often not worth it just because reservations, which come at an extra cost, are mandatory on all high-speed trains, which often adds a lot to the amount it costs and then kind of takes away the savings. So just keep that one in mind. Now, in addition to passes, there's also special offers, especially Trenitalia, who love to throw out just these random offers all the time that they update on their promotions page. So be sure to check out that page for the latest updates, but some of the most popular offers that I think would be interesting for tourists include the Frecciarossa 2-for-1, which is the 2-for-1 tickets on high-speed trains that I mentioned earlier. But there's also the same-day return special on Frecce trains, which can save you 70%. And there's also the weekend return offer, which is when you depart on Saturday, return on Sunday, and you get a 40% discount. All right, that was a long discussion on tickets, but now assuming that you have secured those tickets or a pass, now it's time to move on to the day of your journey, starting with getting snacks and using the facilities. Now, before you get to the station for your big train trip, I highly recommend grabbing snacks, some food, some drinks before you get to the station. And that's just because, especially on regional trains, there's not actually going to be any food or drink available on board, and you want to have some supplies in case you get stuck in a delay. On a similar note, I highly recommend taking care of things bathroom-wise before you get to the station, just because at Italian train stations, you do actually need to pay to use the toilet. Often it's about 50 cents or even €1. And these facilities do really vary in terms of the cleanliness and even the type of toilet. So a lot of first-time visitors are shocked to discover that in some public settings, you might actually find squat toilets in Italy, which I did at the Rimini train station. So just be aware of that. Take care of business before you get to the station. Now let's move on to step 4, which is actually arriving at the station. If you are new to train travel in Italy, I highly recommend arriving at the station 20 to 30 minutes in advance, just because, especially with the larger stations, they can be quite tough to navigate. Again, do remember that some cities have multiple stations, so be sure to double check the name of the station before you set out. I do find that most Italian train stations have pretty excellent signage, a lot of which is bilingual, so you'll have it in both Italian and English. But if you find yourself, let's say, in a transport hub and you're not sure where to find the actual trains, then just look out for a sign that says Treni, and that's going to point you in the right direction. When in doubt, just look for a little train symbol, and that should point you to where the actual platforms are going to be. And if you didn't listen to my advice and you still need to buy tickets, then what you should be looking out for is biglietti, which is going to be really big on the different signs, and that's going to point you either to a ticket office or to the self-service machines where you can buy a ticket. Now, once you're at the station, assuming that you now have your tickets, the next order of business is finding out which platform your train is going to be leaving from. The easiest place to find this information is through the departures board, which is going to be marked with partenze. Now, this is usually located in the main concourse of the train station. You'll usually also find it in smaller screens around the station as well. From left to right, the board will usually say Treno, which specifies the train company, type, and number. Destinazione, which is the final destination of the train. Orario, which is the time of arrival. Ritardo, which is the amount of delay. And Binario, which is the platform. Some screens might also have a column for informazione, which is where they'll tell you additional details like the reason for delay, perhaps where the first class train cars are going to be coming in, etc. Depending on the size of the screen, you might also find abbreviations, so RIT or BIN instead of ritardo and binario. Now, when you're looking at the board, ideally you're looking for a match with the train number and the departure time rather than the destination. And the reason for that is because your destination might not be the one listed, just because the one that's on the board tends to be the final destination of the train. And just as a reminder, usually the destination name is going to be given in Italian, so be sure to know the name of your destination in Italian rather than just English. Now, when in doubt, in larger stations, there's often customer service people for the different train companies, so just look for someone wearing either a Trenitalia or Italo vest, and usually they will be very, very helpful. Now, as a very important tip, do be very careful when you're at Italian train stations, especially in situations when you are reading the board and you might be distracted. And that's just because, unfortunately, train stations are known as kind of a hotbed for petty crime like pickpockets. Now, with the platform number secured, the next step is to get to your platform. This is super easy in Italy because most of the time the platforms are very well labeled. There's going to be signs that say platforms 4 to 7 this way, platforms 1 to 3 this way. But one thing to keep an eye out for is the fact that a lot of the time to get to the different platforms, you actually need to take an underground passage known as a sottopassaggio. So these are underground walkways. Usually just look for stairs and then that'll bring you into a tunnel through which you can just go and then find the different platforms. And so never try to walk across the platform unless you are in a smaller station where there's no underground passageways and there is a sign that clearly says you are allowed to walk on the platform on designated areas. Otherwise, do not try to cross by jumping on the tracks because obviously that is very unsafe. Now, as a reminder, for regional trains, you do need to validate your ticket. So oftentimes in these underground passageways, there will be validator machines. So I definitely recommend validating as soon as you see one, just because speaking from personal experience, as soon as you need one of those machines, they cease to exist. Now, once you're on your platform, double check that it is the correct one by either looking for a big screen on the platform or if the train is there, looking at the train itself. Now let's move on to the next step, which is to find your carriage. So as I mentioned before, on most Italian long distance trains, your seat will be assigned. So look on your ticket for 2 crucial pieces of information, which is firstly the carriage number and also your seat number. Italian long-distance trains can be quite long, so I highly recommend when the train is arriving to keep an eye out for any signage on the train that'll tell you the carriage number, so that way you know if you're in the right spot or if you need to maybe shuffle accordingly down the platform. On and around each carriage door as well, usually there will be seat number specified, and that just basically tells you to go through that door if your seat number is written on the side of it. And that'll save you a lot of awkward shuffling through the train, and trust me, when you have big bags, it can be very awkward. And if you don't have an assigned seat, like with regional trains for instance, it's very easy. You can just take whatever seat is free, assuming it's in the correct class. I tend to find though that the farther down you walk, the freer the seats are going to be and the less busy the carriages will generally be. Now, if you find yourself trying to get on the train and the doors aren't opening, keep an eye out for any buttons that kind of have this symbol on it. And once you press that, the doors should open. Now onwards to the next step, which is finding your seat. If you have an assigned seat, this should be pretty easy. The seats tend to be really well marked, so you just need to find the right one. That said, if you have any big suitcases, I highly recommend dropping them off first at the luggage racks because in most train carriages, the luggage racks are going to be on either side of the carriage. In any case, make sure you keep your valuables on you. Usually there is space under your seat or above the seat as well for smaller bags. Now, that brings us to the next step, which is to get comfortable and enjoy the journey. Now, I should say there are a few amenities that are standard across most Italian trains, so be on the lookout for things like charging ports. Usually the charging ports will be located either on the wall or sometimes below the seat. On some long-distance trains, you'll also find an onboard bistro or restaurant, or sometimes a vending machine to buy snacks. And of course, don't forget to look for the onboard bathrooms, usually marked by WC. These are luckily free, so be sure to take advantage. Now, as you get comfy, do try to keep your ticket and your ID handy just because ticket controllers will typically come on board. Of course, with regional trains, this is a bit more rare, but with a long distance train, you can pretty much guarantee that a ticket controller is going to come by at some point just to double check your ticket. If you have the TRENITALIA app though, with a lot of the long distance trains, you can now check in so that the controller knows you're on board and then they don't need to see your ticket again. Now, after enjoying the ride, the final step is of course to disembark. Now, I highly recommend getting ready to disembark about 10 minutes before you're actually due to arrive at your destination. And the reason I say that is because it does take a while to pack up and collect your bags and things like that. And depending on the stop, a lot of the time Italian trains don't actually stop at the station for very long. So I have heard a lot of anecdotes of first-timers who actually get stuck on the train because they don't have enough time to get their big bags off. And of course, if people are trying to come on board at the same time, it can be very, very stressful. So definitely keep an eye on any of the screens that announce the time that you're set to arrive. And I would also recommend looking at the Google Maps GPS location as well so that you roughly know where you are. Now again, make sure you're memorizing the name of the specific stop that you're getting off at, because some cities have multiple stations. Now upon arrival, if the doors aren't opening, again, be on the lookout for a button or something like that that'll open the doors. And watch your step, because there's often a gap between the train and the platform. To navigate your way off the platform, be on the lookout for signs, or in larger stations, of course, feel free to just follow the crowd. And if this is your final destination and you need a place to drop off your bags, maybe your hotel check-in isn't until later, then you should know that a lot of the major train stations, there will be a paid left luggage area where you can drop off your bags for a fee. There's also quite a few third-party services that allow you to keep your bags in lockers or leave it with a small business as well. Now, as you continue onwards to your final destination, like your hotel or your accommodation, do keep in mind that the ticket that you've purchased for your specific train is likely not going to be valid for any local public transport. So if you need to hop on a bus or hop on a metro, that is probably not going to work with the ticket that you have. So make sure you buy a new ticket for specifically that transport system. And lastly, I should say, if you arrive late because the train has been delayed, you are entitled to compensation. Although the amount and also the form of compensation does depend on the amount of the delay and also the company. So I'll just leave the links for each company down in the description, along with other helpful links from today's video. All right, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found that helpful, and be sure to like and subscribe for more practical travel videos just like this one. I'll see you guys next week. Bye!